to episode 54 of the Critical Fools podcast. This week we'll be discussing the best picture of 2022. No, it was last year's 2021, right? Or the award ceremonies. The award ceremonies this year, but it's last year's best picture. Yeah, Coda, directed by Sean Heder. Actually, I look up her pronunciation because I was like, it's a weird way to spell. She spells her name, at least to me. This film is about. It's actually pretty easy to share. It's a coming of age story of a teenage girl who, Ruby, her name is Ruby in the film, who is like the only child that was born without deafness. So her parents are deaf and her older brother is deaf. And this film takes us through her journey of, I think, becoming, still like honoring her parents and like, like accepting how she grew up, but also pursuing her own dreams and aspirations. So in many ways, I mean, this is actually, before we jump into the film, actually, this actually crossed my mind when I was watching this. And maybe it's just like, there's just a lot of films that are made in America, but like, it seems like when I think of like American culture, the coming of age film archetype is kind of common, right? We can think of Breakfast Club, we can think of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Like, I'm curious, like, why do you think American culture, maybe it's like maybe beyond our culture too, but like, why do you think specifically our culture has a lot of these films that we like to promote often? Because I think of some of the most iconic films of our culture, it's like usually these kind of films too.
Yeah, I think they just or they become sort of like cult classics in a way. I'm not too familiar with other cinema abroad to say that that's not necessarily a part of their filmmaking process too, or like film classics. So I don't know, like in Europe, if that might be an archetype of a film that they like too.
Well, I think it is. I think it is, but it seems like, I don't know. Just this is all intuition because I've seen a decent amount of European films.
People kind of like feel good movies, like in a way about people who sort of grow and like there's some story of they start off that way and they kind of, and then like often like with this movie, it's kind of the underdog of like the whole family pressure of doing one thing and you really want to pursue your dream and do another. Like with Ferris Bueller's Day Off, that's sort of a feel-good kind of movie that sort of hits a moment within American, I would say, society, or that sort of feel from the 80s. And I think that's what a lot of coming-of-age movies do. They sort of capture a moment in time, in a way, of like that specific era that sort of resonates with people who grew up around that time specifically. And then, yeah, a lot of people kind of like feel-good movies too, which a lot of coming-of-age movies kind of are.
Yeah,
I don't know if you wanted to add something or you had your own.
No, I just found that curious because when I saw this film and it was a good film and it had an interesting, unique twist on it. But then I was thinking like a lot of movies that at least are let's say domestic Academy Awards or just even our culture, they seem to really elevate these movies.
The Academy Awards and like we have our own thoughts on the Best Picture film selection process, which oftentimes we think they're full of garbage.
Yeah, they are pretty full of garbage.
Because a lot of it is just who's in their inner circle.
And also who promotes the film. It's like a whole promotion process. And it's also very subjective, right?
Well, no, our thoughts are completely objective.
So what's also interesting about this...
We have no bias, Chris.
I have filled with bias with films and movies. Anyways, when it comes... So another thing too, which is interesting before we want to get into the film, and this is maybe the cultural significance of our moment, is this is the first of all, Apple TV bought the rights for this film. And this is the first, I guess, streaming service, quote unquote, to win a big Academy Award. And obviously Netflix probably felt slighted. But I think it speaks to a wider moment where films are now... Probably most people consume films off their own TVs and their own tablets now versus movie theaters.
Right.
And I'm curious to your thoughts on like maybe in the next 5 years of like, how do you think this is evolving? Like, how do you think it's all going to play out?
Wait, can you repeat that, Chris?
Basically, like for the, like, so recognizing that moment, how do you feel the next 5 years are going to pan out for the movie industry? Do you think that movie theaters are just going to not go away, but like, do you think this also will change how we perceive the Academy, the awards? Because I think we've already talked about in the past movie theaters, but like, what do you think is going to happen with like movie studios, and like do you think now like just Apple TV, Netflix, Amazon, like do they start
Like
gobbling up
how they
more?
change the game?
No, no, like the next 5 years, do you think they start becoming like, how like when we grew up, it was like, oh, 20th Century Fox, Paramount Pictures. Do you think Amazon, Netflix, Apple are going to replace, these kind of studios? And like how do you see the next 5,
I'm
10
not
years
sure.
going?
I think it's just more competition. I think you're going to see more. I think you're going to see more and more people sort of disrupting this industry. I don't know how exactly. I mean, look what happened even this week. Netflix tumbled in their stock price, and that's affecting things in a big way. Who knows really what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years in the movie industry? 25 years ago, no one even thought that Netflix was like, even in the early days, everyone thought Netflix was kind of a joke. And then now look at the sort of titan that they are. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's going to be a lot more disruption going forward.
Yeah, the only thoughts I have that are concrete is that the stigma around streaming, like movies launching on streaming only, or their first run is on a streaming service, has died. Like
Oh, it's
in
done.
the end, like the consumers have just like voted with their feet and money that if they like a film, they're gonna make it viral through social media or whatnot. And I think
Sure.
the power of like the Academy is they've had to reconcile with that.
I think with a lot of sort of industry titan, like there's certain stories, certain studios that are always, I think, they're gonna be there for the foreseeable future. I mean, even though Netflix and all these streaming services have made a splash, like I mean, there's still a huge fanfare around, say, for example, the Marvel studio, right? And how much like money they like every time they make a film, they make so much money. Like these streaming services haven't made a dent in that.
That's true.
So, yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens in the next 5 to 10 years, anyway.
Yeah, it's just like I bring it up because this movie has that at least cultural significance, and that outside of the film itself, it has that cultural significance.
Sure.
So just to get it started, so obviously our young protagonist, teenage protagonist, is she's like any normal person. Like she, goes to high school and she's struggling with her own identity, but also the fact that I think one of the big themes is obviously her relationship with her family, who are all deaf.
And
And I do want to give it, and she's the only one that isn't. And also the ultimate, twist, which I think was part of the storyline, is that, she wants to sing. So we'll get into some of those themes.
Of course. That's the ironic twist.
But before we get into that, this is also the second movie I've seen where they really highlighted that Bostonian landscape. So Manchester by the Sea did the same thing. So I'm curious, like, what did you think of how they did that backdrop,
Oh, I mean, I thought it was pretty. It was gorgeous. I don't know why they necessarily selected Mass for that. I think it's the actual setting is Gloucester, which is like pretty north, because like they're not in Boston, but I imagine it's like an hour away or so.
Yeah, it's like that Massachusetts like landscape, which is very interesting because it's the second movie that like they're not really in Boston at all, right? But like they wear like the Boston gear, so you would know that it's Massachusetts. It's kind of interesting because a lot of people probably don't know where these towns are.
Well, you're right, but I mean, it's kind of like if you're around the surrounding areas of any big city, you're gonna root for those teams or like identify with that kind of culture, right? I mean, it's not that surprising.
And then also, since I've seen the other one, what's interesting too is that this is another film that highlights boats. So there must be a big boating culture there.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's a coastal community, so
yeah,
that's not that surprising. Most of it is probably like most of the industry there is fishing.
But there's big boating communities in other parts of America too. Yeah.
Sure, I'm not saying there's not. I'm just saying within that town, that's the big thing.
Oh,
what
yeah,
else
definitely in that time.
They do there aside from fishing?
I wouldn't know.
Yeah, exactly.
But okay, yeah. What I do like is I think some I will say this, maybe because Manchester by Sea was super popular. I think there is a aesthetic appeal to, because I've noticed that like if you watch that film, and I don't know if I'll ever pick it, but like you'll see that like stylistically it's actually very similar. I think it's totally different. Yeah, but they're very similar. So I found that very curious of like, it's not the same setting, but like, same region, but like it's a very similar style of like how they shot the film, in my opinion. And I just found that pretty like just a thought that came in my mind while I was watching it. But going back to our main storyline, so obviously we can't avoid the deafness, and I know you have thoughts on another film that also touched the topic.
Yeah,
But
it's a little off pod.
yeah, but I will say, like, what did you so off like because that's initially the backdrop. What did you think of how they portrayed like somebody who is like basically being raised by people who are deaf, and like how that affected her relationship with her family and her friends and her social circle? Like, what's your thoughts on that? How they handle that? Was it realistic? Did you like what directions they went? What would you like to see explored? It's an open question, but go ahead.
I don't know the exact relationships that most Coda kids, people who grew up with deaf parents, how they interact, or how, if this movie did justice to that. What I will say is the acting performances by them were very good. Like, it was really interesting, the sort of dynamic, because you go, that was what's really interesting with this film, is it goes speaking to like interacting, and there were moments where it's just communication with the family members all by sign language. And then there were other moments where they went from speaking and having this world to the world that the parents sort of had. That was, I thought, was pretty cool about this, is like you see them interacting when they're in a later sequence in the film, when they're at their choir singing their daughter, and you see everybody like clapping and interacting, and then it's just pure silence. That was really trippy. I thought that was well done, and it really puts you sort of in that perspective of like, oh man, like, yeah, you just can't pick up on typical cues, because that's one of the senses that everyone takes for granted that these people don't have. So I thought the film did a good job with that. I don't know how accurate, or like if the interactions that, obviously this is a very unique family too. Like, that's probably not how most people sort of interact or deal with certain issues, right? The parents are very quirky. But
that was a funny. Sorry, go ahead.
I thought they did a good job sort of portraying those interactions.
No, so I will say this. That was a funny, quirky, because this film, obviously it's a film, right? It's an art form, right? So like they have these, like I said, the parents are basically, let's just say they have a robust sex life, and because they're deaf, they don't know the tone of their voice. So like there's that funny scene where they're pretty much screaming.
They're loud, and like the daughter can hear, and she has a friend over, and they're horrified. And then they have like a family roundtable to discuss it, and they don't handle it, like they embarrass her. They don't handle it in the best way possible.
No, and also with sign language, and I don't think the other character, the friend she brought over, knew it, and so only Ruby's really embarrassed because she's like trying to like translate,
and she knows, and there's many times where they say something, and she's like, "I'm gonna leave this out."
Yeah, I'm not saying that. Yeah, especially when he did like the whole like rapid thing, I was dying, dude.
This guy. Well, I mean, that's just like they were very open about it, and she like, it's very interesting with people who have families that are more open. Sometimes they wish they're slightly more reserved, and then vice versa, right? From more conservative families, sometimes you like, some kids are like, I wish we were a little more open about certain things.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. And then her brother's character was interesting too. How Ruby's friend pretty much wants to shag her brother, which was interesting. Yeah,
And she does. Like, I was confused. She does, right?
Yeah,
like that was
she does.
Character, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they end up like coupling up, but it was just interesting because like he was confused initially because like,
yeah, she's like, what is it? Like, what's a sign language where I'm really into you? She tells him.
No, not even that. She was like, I want to bang, right? And then like she does the thing, and he said like, why is she like saying like so?
And then you just see sort of the grin on Ruby's face.
Yeah, because she told her to do the thing. Like, why
she had done?
Yeah,
so that was a funny moment.
Yeah, even like I thought another interesting aspect they showed was like their relation, like they're fishermen, but they can't hear the the boat signals.
Sure.
Yeah,
right.
And obviously that becomes one of the crisis points of the film because they get caught and fined and they don't have a lot of money. But also the fact that like, and that's a topic here that Ruby's done all because she can walk both worlds. She's done the translator, and like the brother has a great line where he says like, we need to force our own supposed neighbors to learn some sign language if we're gonna be part of this community. Like everybody was just taking that was a good theme in this film where everybody was just taking the easy path and just relying on Ruby, who was, it was unfair on her to do like everything. And her family, of course, did that, but also the community too. Like they just said, "Oh, Ruby, can you just, you know, talk to them?"
So I wanted to ask you something. What did you think about the portrayal of, or what did you think of Mr. V's character?
I thought he was a good character for the. What is this? Like,
I'm just curious.
I thought his character was very. He was actually one of the stronger performances too, right? Like he was a music teacher, really invested in Ruby and actually pushing her to get her to do what she wants, and actually setting those boundaries of like you need to, you know, you can't you can't if you really want this singing stuff, you can't like treat it like second or third rate, right? Like you have to put the effort in and show the discipline.
Mhm.
Now, what I think of this art like stereotype of the failed musician and and the freaking scarf and stuff. I mean, it's a bit much,
Or-
but at the same time, I can kind of believe it, having lived in New York for a while now. Like, yeah, they are
You
these.
have some of that. I mean, there are certain stereotypes that
Yeah,
are
I actually have a. I can't divulge too much, but I do know somebody who
you know
works in
someone
the art.
in your circles.
Yeah, it works in the art scene, and then also will say like, "Oh yeah, I have to renew my Obamacare." It's like it's not. It's a you have to be really into that life, like
Sure.
to because
The
it's not
struggle.
really stable. Yeah.
Yeah, I
So,
mean,
but
definitely
yeah.
a theme. This guy kind of reminds me of this is a series in a way, kind of because it was interesting because he comes from like his background. He's from Mexico, and he's sort of like a yeah, he's in music. He's a music teacher, but it kind of reminds me a little bit Gael Bernal Garcia's character or Garcia Bernal in Mozart in the Jungle, which you had previously recommended.
Yeah. I
And it
never
was kind of
finished
I
it,
forgot
but
all.
I
Yeah,
forgot about it too because the show's okay. It's not like I'm not pounding I'm not pounding the table for it. Everybody
no,
hard.
no, but I did like his portrayal of the composer, not necessarily the show itself, but I thought his acting was good.
Yeah.
Which like he's been in. For those of you who don't know, he's been in a lot of great movies in his career. Like I think I don't know if you ever saw, but Itu Mama también was pretty good. It was
I saw that one.
a
That was
very
good. That
interesting movie.
was a good
But
one.
anyway, I digress. Yeah, I was kind of curious as to what your thoughts were on him. I thought he did a good performance.
His character is really important. I mean, it's the character kind of represents
The one
like,
who leaves when no one
yeah,
else does.
I think he was the mentor archetype, right? Like he was like the one saying like, no, if you really want to be a singer, you have to do X, Y, Z. It's not just going to come to you. You have to go pursue it. You have to go to college. You got to, and he was, so the catalyst of her telling her like, cause and this is the typical coming of age thing, right? Like you're at a crossroads, right? Like, she had two choices, right? Like, okay. And they're actually not, either one's not bad, right? Like you could totally understand, like, look, I got to stay with my family. They need help. They need to start the business. I need to, do the translation. I'll postpone college, right? Or do what she ended up doing in the spoiler, doing this film, right? Like go pursue her dreams, right? And I think that's why I'll say, like, as a coming of age story, this is well crafted because that is often the choices one has to make sometimes in life, right? You can't, sometimes it is mutually exclusive, unfortunately. And, a lot of people sometimes struggle with that, but, she has to come with that conundrum. And Mr. V's character is one of the, her mentor, but also the one pushing her to one direction. And also, I did find, and then jokes aside, the one scene where he accidentally says like "F you" to his dad was funny. That was good. Oh, I'm learning sign language. I've been practicing all week, and he's like, really? I was dying.
Right. I mean, he tries, and they kind of understand because I'm sure they get a lot of that.
But
So
you touched upon this scene. I think the most powerful scene is the when they see her sing for the first time, and you have that, what's it like for the audience, us, and then what's it like for
yeah,
her parents.
that was good. I thought that was the best choice that they could have done in that for that sequence.
And it goes back to also like, because I just went to Carnegie Hall recently. Like, if you're deaf, you don't understand the cues of when to like to clap, when to stand, and like they were kind of lost a little bit, even though they were sure to support their daughter, they were kind of lost because they don't know. Like it's just tough.
Well, it's also interesting because in this film, right, it's like they don't know that sensation of sound or a performance. They just can't comprehend that because they don't have that sense or that ability to sense that. which is tough because I think that's such a powerful part of human experience.
And actually, there's that scene with the parents I thought was really good, where like the dad was saying, like, just let her do the singing, and the mom says, like, but we don't even know if she's good, like, right? Because a normal parent would be like, okay, you're doing something that like you might love it,
Well,
but
she
like it's
got
not gonna,
talent, but they can't tell that she has talent.
they can't tell, right? Even though obviously we, the viewer, can tell that she has some talent, you know.
Honestly, I think the most important, or like the scene that was like I found like the toughest was when it was just the dad and the daughter, and they're like on his truck, right? And you just see them, and he's like, "Can you sing for me again?" And then he like puts her hand on her throat to feel like the reverberations, because that was the thing I loved, was he's like, "Oh yeah, he loves gangster rap," because like he could actually feel the bass a little bit. He
Yeah.
could hear it, but he just feels the bass.
Yeah,
So,
that's why he pumps. That's when I remember that scene when they drives in the car and she's like, "Turn it
yeah,
down." He's like, "But this is the only way I can hear the music." It's like he said, he has to feel it through his ass.
yeah.
I think he even says that. Like, I have to feel it through my butt. Yeah.
So that's
The
why he likes
yeah,
heavy bass.
no, I
But
think
that
it's
was
just
the whole
go ahead.
point. Like he feels
Yeah,
like her vibrations,
yeah. He holds her neck. Yeah, yeah.
and so like
The
that's how he, or like that's the only way he could really connect to her singing.
the director and the writer, screenplay writer, did this very well, right? That's the scene with her. I thought both scenes with the
I thought
when
that
she
was
had
great.
one-on-ones with parents were good, right? So that one was with her dad, right, with the music. But even the one with her mom, where the mom even admits that like she was hoping her kid she would be deaf so
Oh,
she
that
could
was rough.
relate. That was really good too. I think those one-on-one scenes were
Those were the
like
best when he
yeah,
the ones with the parents.
because she didn't know she could be like a good parent if her kid wasn't deaf. Because like she had a good interest. I mean, it was it was still rough to hear, but she had an interesting take, right? Like, I can't help you or help. We can't experience the world together. So how are we gonna be mother daughter? You know?
Yeah,
Yeah, because I can't. I'm deaf, you know, and you're not. Yeah.
and she even said it was hard for myself and my mother to relate because she could hear and I couldn't.
Yeah,
So yeah, I get it.
that was brutal. But
Very.
yeah. So this film has like a lot of those I would say emotional gut punch moments that I've gone desensitized now because I've seen too many movies. But it was, I could see how this was definitely.
There's a couple films that have gotten you before.
Yeah, but they have to be deep, you know, like, you know.
Gotta be New York, Schenectady.
Yeah.
Down.
What's interesting is that the podcast we listened to, the comedian was saying that he cried during Coda. So
Oh yeah. I was dying. Yeah, but it relates to him and his story. That's why he's like, I love those like, me against the world, like your family one and one thing. I was also dying because the co-host who's Indian was said that. Oh my gosh, there was a film that he said that his uncle made him watch because like the whole plot was like he wanted to be an engineer.
of course.
I was like, wow. I was like, that's the difference in cultures. One saw like their dream is to be in the arts. The other, the dream is to be an engineer in the sciences. So
Yeah.
I found that funny. But yeah, I agree. Those one-on-one scenes I think were the most impactful in this movie. But yeah, is there any other specific one?
Let's see. I guess, what did you think of her relationship with her crush that seemed to go sour a little bit because of the,
I thought what was interesting was perspective, right? Because like she was always shy and awkward around him, and then he admits that like when he was a kid, he kind of looked up to like how strong she was because she had to be the voice for her family, right? Because you're like a little kid and you have to order and communicate, and they really were completely dependent upon her. And so he kind of admired that a little bit, and she never realized that he saw that in a way. And then, like, when they had their little one-on-one when she was still mad at him, she's like, dude, he's like, I'm gonna be honest, I'm jealous of you. He's like, yeah, your parents have these issues and they're not perfect, but at least y'all are a family. Because like what he was going through was just a broken one. So I thought that was actually a pretty good interaction as well. And she saw it differently because she has her own struggles with her family, but she didn't quite appreciate what she had relative to his experience.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Because they're quirky, right? They're awkward. They embarrass her all the time. At least they're together.
exactly. And
he even said, "You like your parents are madly in love." He's like, "Mine can't even be in a room for more than 5 minutes with themselves." So, Enjoy what you have.
Yeah, it's that whole adage, like you sometimes focus too much on the things you don't have and not the things you do.
Right.
And and I think Ruby, again, this is why coming of age stories are good. I have my own theory of why they're popular. And I think they're also popular because they remind us, the audience, of things that we tend to forget sometimes as our lives go along. Right.
Sure.
Because when I was a teenager, I was just like, full steam ahead. I think I mean I'm always gonna be a teenager at heart, but the you know, yeah, I recently finished a documentary that really resonated with me. And we'll get into it off pod maybe, but it reminded me of aspects of my childhood that I was like, yeah, I remember being really into this, and maybe I gotta get back on it. But yeah, I have my, like, that's my theory of why coming of age stories in general. I actually think they're universal. I just haven't had a chance to watch some of like different countries, but I do find for some reason our culture does a little bit extra, and I think the reason is because we're a young
Uh-huh.
country in a sense, and also we just produce a lot of movies too. And these are, like you said, they're kind of like in some ways like emotional candy. But going back to the film, I think there's themes here that remind us of like things that we forget sometimes as we get older and stuff. Because like we're just older now, and we just forget like these kind of lessons or things like you said, like we tend to forget like the things we do have. And I think Ruby in the end realizes this, right? She goes to pursue her dreams, but like that last scene is very symbolic of the movie, right? Like she's sad, she's happy that she's doing, she knows she has to do this, but she's also sad that she is not going to see her family all the time, right? It's almost like at peace at moment. And she'll have future challenges, but like you said, her friend or basically her crush, right, her boyfriend. I don't know how that ends. It's kind of teenage love,
Yeah.
but like because long distance is tough. But the
Yeah, but it's not like they're super far from Boston.
yeah, but you know how it is. Anyways, what was I gonna say? Sorry, my point was like, yeah, like I lost track of my point.
That's all good. Yeah, no, I thought this. What I will say is this is good, but it was a little cliche, and I think what kind of biased me against appreciating this film more is like we had recently reviewed in other pod. I don't remember what episode, but The Sound of Metal, which is about a musician who starts to lose his hearing, which was it was interesting because these are two different perceptions, and they're both dealing with the idea of deafness. One is a family who's deaf, and they have a daughter who can hear and translates and struggle because they rely on her so much, but she wants to pursue her own dreams. And the other is about someone whose whole livelihood is appreciating music, and he loses what really brings him his identity in this world, which is music. And like, so it was interesting because I personally thought that The Sound of Metal was a more powerful film, in my opinion, because I think they went quite a bit deeper than this
Well,
film was.
I like Sound of Metal a lot more, but to defend Coda, I will say this: Coda is
Oh, no,
like I said, a coming of age archetype, and Sound of Metal is a much deeper.
but that's my point. I think
That's
if I
something
haven't seen,
lost. Yeah.
I like this is the thing. People try to act as non-biased as they can, but I have this recency bias of having seen that film not too long ago, and so that does cloud the lens with which I viewed this film a bit.
Yeah, but your lens are always clouded. I gotta be clear like mine. Anyways,
Oh, that's you're oh.
uh,
Even we were no, don't you start with this. We were reviewing old films, and even you're like, "What was I thinking? I forgot what film rating." You're like, "I was way off on this one."
yeah, but yeah,
But
it's
you see that all the time. There's a pretty big YouTuber. He's called the Needle Drop, and he reviews albums. He's got like a ton of subscribers, and even sometimes he goes back and he's like, "Yeah, he's like my perceptions have changed on this rating quite a bit. Like he'll go up or down on some." So it happens. Sometimes it's just like you grow to appreciate, or like you grow out of something that you really enjoyed.
yeah. But yeah, I Sound of Metal. I mean, I will say we've already done an episode on that.
Yeah. But anyway,
But
it was the only reason I brought them up is the both of those films dealt with that deafness.
yeah, yes, yeah, and in a different way. I would say like they're both good films. I would say Sound of Metal is a bit better because I think the performance actually was just surreal.
Phenomenal.
But also, it's a tougher topic to handle, right? Like honestly, like you said, coming of age. In the end of the day, you have to be really you have to make a really bad film to like not have it like at least resonate with some people,
This
right?
was a good movie. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, because coming of age is still at the end. You're right. Maybe Ruby's life turns to crap later, but like coming of age always usually leaves you with like, okay, they've grown and now they're ready for the next step of their life. Sound of Metal leaves you with like a message of like, in the end, he has to learn to accept what he has now.
It was dealing with it was finally
acceptance.
Well, it was coming to terms with the reality with which he had and having and accepting what has happened and being at peace with that, which was crazy powerful.
Because it's a very powerful message even today, right? Can you really accept like your own limitations, right? Whether like whether you
the way with which they did that and chose to portray that was just so powerful. Yeah, I was left like blown away. Film. Like that was one of the films with the best endings I think I've ever seen in cinema.
Yeah, and it was like a perfect motif. I mean, his deafness, but like you can put it to like somebody who has a medical condition like diabetes, or somebody who is just has the learning like anything, right? You can't just fix it with a click of a switch, right? Even though you would maybe want to. And that's a very powerful, or like it could be other things in life, right? Like you had a bad divorce, or your kids disappoints you, whatever it is. But like that's also a universal message, is that those are harder to tackle, like you said, and also they're harder to even make it into a great film, because it's not really like an easy like archetype to really just like make, like these, like you said, like there's way more of these type of films, Coda, than there is the other one, right? So that was my point of earlier in the pod.
It's also hard to make or write a tight script like they did in Sound of Metal. Like it was tight. Like there's a couple films that make really tight scripts and we enjoy them, where there's no like additional fluff, where they could have, like, I always bring this up, not that it was a bad film, but Wolf on Wall Street was too long to me. Like there was like it was almost 3 hours though, and there were scenes where I'm like, why was this included? And it's sometimes because some of these artistic directors like to think that everything they do is just genius. And my own opinions on
Scorsese's the GOAT.
He didn't have to have that whole Lamborghini scene. It was completely unnecessary in that movie. But anyway, I digress. And Sound of Metal was just so tight with everything that they did in that I thought it was brilliant.
It was a really good film. Yep.
So anyway, is there anything that you wanted to touch upon with this that we haven't really covered? I mean, it's a pretty sequential movie that was pretty well done. Acting was great, I thought. Yeah. I don't know if you want to touch on anything else or get
I mean, like we just covered the ending where she says, I think she's actually Lise was doing the sign language, right? Like I love you, or I love you, or something like that. We talked about all the characters that I think were worth mentioning. I mean, we talked about her brother a little bit, but he was just a good side character.
One of my other favorite scenes, and that's just because I like a little populist movements, for the little guy. But I love when she's interpreting like her dad, and they're fighting against the board of regulators.
Oh yeah,
understand the working man struggle, and they're like, we're barely making ends meet, and like they want to charge us $800 a day to have someone monitor my work, even though they don't know what they're doing. I thought that was a great scene, and they're like, because like they always felt like they don't get respect because they're deaf, and then they say everything that all the fishermen are feeling, and or how they internalized it, and then all of a sudden all the fishermen rallied around it.
Yeah, that was cool.
So I was like, I like that. They're like, even the dude was saying, he's like signing, he's like, my grandfather, my dad have been fishing these seas their entire lives. And he's like, and I've been doing the same. And you're gonna have to rip me from my boat to like get me out of that sea. And I was like, yeah. And they're all like, yeah.
That was good.
I guess
the only other scene, and this is just a side thing, is like the cliff diving scenes. Having done finally cliff diving myself, I recommend. It's really fun. It is daunting at first, but once you do it at once, you realize that fear is all in the mind.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was
cool. Acapulco, if you want another destination where you can go cliff diving, Chris.
I mean, no, my next thing is I gotta go cage diving with sharks, dude. So
okay, this guy. What are you gonna do next after that? Wingsuit jumping?
No, I gotta ask Elon to send me to the moon.
You're like, I'm gonna be the first person on Mars.
I'm ready to go. Guinea pig me up. Hey, yo, that'd be hey, the risk is worth it because if you can start the new civilization on Mars, yeah. My form of government finally. That's gonna be
Away
good.
from everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, do you want to get in the final rating, son?
Yeah, let's give it a final rating. You can go first.
Yeah, I could go first. Yeah, so like we've sort of, I'll summarize a little bit. What we talked about, this is a different twist on a coming of age film. This is a film that deals with people who don't have the typical ability to hear. So that they are, I wouldn't say they're quite disabled because they can still function, but they don't have the auditory sense that we sort of take for granted. They're deaf. And so because of that, it sort of affects the way they deal with the world. And they rely on their daughter who can hear to really be able to translate and communicate with everybody else in their community. Right. And so it was an interesting take that they had on this film, which I did appreciate. So it's not like your typical cliche coming of age film. It did have that unique twist to it. I thought the acting was tight. I thought the parents really did justice playing sort of their quirky roles. In that it was interesting because they played quirky characters who were deaf, which was a really unique sort of choice. I thought in terms of the character writing, and they did a great job. I thought the brother did well as well, and so did Mr. Villalobos and obviously Ruby. She killed it in her role. So there's nothing I could really say there that I would knock any of the actors' performances. But yeah, there's nothing that was super like crazy deep with this. I mean, it's someone who just was dealing with the adversity of like what society and her parents expected of her and what she really wanted to pursue. And for a while she had that guilt of like, I can't really leave my parents behind because I've never done anything without my family. And then Mr. Villalobos, he basically mentors her and kind of understands where she's coming from and tries to push her. He's like, dude, like this is something you have the talent. He's like, I don't just take the time for just anybody. He's like, I see something in you, and he pushes her to do this, and eventually she goes and gets accepted at Berkeley. So it has a typical happy ending that you'd expect and you'd want from a film like this.
And to clarify, Berkeley in Massachusetts, not Berkeley.
Berkeley School of Music.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty famous, music conservatory.
People might think Berkeley, California. That's why.
Not UC Berkeley, which is like more in our neck of the woods. But overall, I thought this is a really good film. I would definitely recommend this, and I think the rewatchability is pretty high in this movie. So for that, I give it an 8.5.
All right, it's my turn, right? So yeah, so this film I picked it for two reasons. One, I wanted to see all the hype because of the Apple TV, because I just got Apple TV last year, and there's a lot of great shows on there, by the way, and also I won the Academy Award too. But I actually preferred the film that won the Academy Award the year before, No Man Land. That was a good one. Nomadland, sorry. That was actually much better than this one, in my opinion. Also, my co-host here always critiques me about picking digestible films, so I knew this one he could watch without, complaining to me.
Sometimes you pick things that are just so artsy that it's just. And I like artsy films, but sometimes
which is like
I watch so many like New York Syndicate or Schenectady in a row. Once a while.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that. But it's so this was definitely like let's just call it like a soda. You can drink it pretty quickly. Unfortunately, you're not gonna have that luxury next time. But
we need to throw these in because they're more likely to be to resonate and actually be discovered as a channel.
Oh, okay. Hey, you'll be surprised, right? One day that niche film is gonna blow us up.
What's been our highest viewed film was American History X.
Yeah, it's still the highest viewed film. Yeah,
I don't think it'll ever be surpassed. Anyway, go ahead.
But yeah, it's I think the issue is that I've seen a lot of coming of age films over my life, and this one is just gonna be one in the file cabinet, unfortunately. I think the deafness is very unique, but then I would, like you said, I would say watch Sound of Metal if you want more of an aspect around
for sure
deafness and loss and stuff. I find that sort of to be more human. I think this one's like just it just would feel good, and it's also like our main character. It's an interesting. I will say this film does highlight awareness around children who are raised by deaf people, so that's a good. But yeah, it's definitely a solid film. I think it's gonna be it's gonna be widely watched because it's on a big streaming platform. So it's not like some films where like we have to really iterate. Like you're not gonna find it in many places. Like some of the ones we did early, like with um, Upstream Color and what was the other one? The other one he did,
Primer.
Primer. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so for me, I give it a 7 out of 10. You know, it's a solid. You know, it's good. You know, you can watch it with your family, your girlfriend, or whatever, and you know, and have a good time. But it's not one of those films where like I'm just going like, you know, me. My critique is like I feel such a, you know, a depthness to the film where it just really either emotionally hits me really really hard or like it makes me think for hours. So yeah, and those are the films that give me the greatest highs. You know, that's how I am. So with the
No,
but
you really like the abstract ones that really hit home too. That are like, it's like no one's gonna get this meaning, but I understood it.
Or I have my interpretation of what I think it means, you know. But yeah, like it's a good film though. I do recommend it.
Hmm?
You know, it's
A lot of people are
solid.
gonna enjoy this.
Yeah, people will watch it. It's also not long either, right? We didn't talk about the length. It's a very like standard
Right.
length, you know, so it's nothing like my 3-hour picks, you know. But don't worry, you're lucky. You're lucky. Night of Cups is only 2 hours.
What was the movie I picked that was so long? We were like, I get it, we liked it, but it was it could have
Oh,
been.
it was super long. It was what was it?
It wasn't Stranger Stalker.
Stalker, yeah. I
Yeah,
love
that
Stalker.
was.
And I had to take a break or two. I was like, this is so long. Like the first 45 minutes, they don't even say the line, dude. I'm like, oh, okay. This is slow. This is like slow,
Right.
slow. Like there's slow and then there's that movie.
It was snail's pace.
I was like, no, seriously, like you have long shots and be like, okay, like long shot, okay, but is this shot gonna change? Like it's just 5 minutes like this. Like we're literally staring at like a bird moving. I'm like, this is interesting.
Oh,
Um, but yeah, it's good, and so I'll leave it at that.
yeah. Well, anyway, that's it for our commentary this week on the 2021 film Coda. I just
It's
want to make sure it's
2021.
2021.
Yeah, 2021.
You there?
Yeah, I'm here. 2021. Yeah.
All right, you cut out for a second. Yeah, that's our the end of our commentary for this week. If you liked and subscribe, or if you enjoyed what we were talking about on this film, please like and subscribe to our channel, and don't hesitate to give us any movie recommendations for films that you think we should see. So we'll definitely be sure to look at those. Anyway, we'll stay tuned till next week, and we're out.